In the third quarter of this year, a 5-room HDB flat in Bishan that is not a penthouse, not a private property, but an apartment that's built by the same people who manage your parking fines was just sold for $1.5 million. A few weeks before that, a jumbo flat in Ang Mo Kio went for a cool $1.2 million. And before that, a procession of 5 roomers in Clemency, Toa Payoh, and Queenstown all crossed the threshold of 7 figures. This isn't a freak occurrence anymore. It's the new norm. Last year, 569 HDB flats, 69, were sold for over $1 million. This year, we are on track to absolutely shatter that record. The median price of a resale flat in a mature estate has reached a number that a decade ago would have gotten you laughed out of the showroom and possibly investigated for attempting to pass counterfeit money. This situation forces a generation of young Singaporeans to look at the single biggest purchase of their entire lives not as an exciting milestone, but a monumental financial peak. Which begs a very simple and important question. Why are HDBs so expensive? I started my investigation as all serious journalists do by going deep undercover at my own desk, typing Singapore Public Housing for Dummies into my computer. The official narrative, as presented by a very sleek government website, is a heroic one. It's a story of progress, a nation providing for its people, a masterclass in urban planning. And to be fair, it's not wrong. It's just not the whole story. To understand the story we have now, where public housing costs more than a private castle in some other countries, you first have to understand the one they are telling. You have to go back to the beginning. Picture Singapore in the early 1960s. Much of the island was a chaotic maze of slums and overcrowded squatter settlements. The infamous Bukit Ho Swee fire in 1961 left 16,000 people homeless in a single day. The British-era Singapore Improvement Trust was simply not equipped for a problem of such scale. The newly formed Housing Development Board's mission was therefore urgent and heroic. Its KPI was simple: build as many flats as possible, as quickly as possible. Its mission statement was clear: give every citizen a clean, safe, and dignified home. And they succeeded spectacularly. In the first 3 years, HDB built over 31,000 flats, more than the SIT managed in 3 decades. It was a miracle of public policy. But somewhere along the way, the miracle of a social good started moonlighting as a high-performing financial asset. Today, there are 2 main paths of getting these homes, and the first is the build-to-order scheme, also known as BTO. This is a high-stakes game of chance that combines the romance of a signed legal document with the thrill of a 4D draw. The government sells you a flat directly from its plans at a heavily subsidized price, and all you got to do is beat thousands of other hopeful couples to a good queue number. If you are lucky enough to find a partner, convince them you are a worthy long-term investment, and then win this housing lottery, congratulations to you. You've secured a home at a reasonable price. You just have to wait for 4 to 5 years for it to be built. But if you're single like me, unfortunately, the system kindly informs you to wait until you're 35 and then come back again next time. This leaves a huge number of people with only one other option: the resale market. The wild, untamed frontier of the Singaporean real estate, where the gentle guidance of the state is replaced by the invisible hand in the market, which often uses that hand to reach directly into your pocket and into your wallet. The simple answer you get from your uncle at Chinese New Year right after he's finished his 3rd pineapple tart and is about to ask you why you're still single is limited land. And yes, Singapore is a small island, but blaming everything on our geography is like blaming a fire on the existence of oxygen. It's technically true, but it misses the entire point of how the fire actually started. For starters, the flats themselves are excellent. We are not talking about crumbling concrete boxes. Modern HDB towns are marvels of urban planning. They are built to incredibly high standards with durable materials and fantastic communal facilities. We are talking about integrated hawker centers, rooftop gardens, multi-story car parks, all seamlessly connected. This quality costs money. Then you have to factor in global economic forces. The price of steel, concrete, and labor isn't set in a meeting room in Toa Payoh. It's set on the world market. Global inflation and supply chain disruptions over the past few years have directly translated to higher construction costs, which inevitably puts upward pressure on the prices of existing flats. But the real fuel for this fire isn't just cost, it's demand. Insatiable government-encouraged demand. Through a vast array of housing grants, the enhanced CPF housing grant, the proximity housing grant, the family grant, The government actively helps citizens buy these flats. And while this is great for helping with the down payment, it has an unintended side effect. It doesn't lower the seller's asking price. It just gives every buyer more ammunition, allowing them to bid higher. The grants effectively get absorbed into the final price, pushing the entire market up. Then there's the great spillover effect from private property. The government has introduced round after round after round of cooling measures aimed at the private market, and the most significant one is the additional buyer stamp duty tax, also known as ABSD. So, what does a well off couple who just sold their condo do? To avoid a massive tax on their next private property, their best option is often to downgrade. It's the financially prudent version of witness protection, hiding out from the taxman in a 5-room flat in Bishan. These cash rich buyers enter the HDB market not looking for a bargain, but for the best, and they have the firepower to pay $1 million without even blinking. But even beyond these factors, there's a more fundamental reason that underpins the entire market, a piece of social engineering so deeply woven into our society that we often forget that it's there. For a huge portion of the pioneers and Merdeka generations, their HDB flat isn't just a home. It is their single largest and in many cases, their only significant financial asset. It is their retirement plan. Think about it. For decades, a portion of every Singaporean's salary has been channeled into their CPF. A large chunk of their CPF has, by design, been used to pay for that HDB. This policy of asset enhancement has performed a kind of financial alchemy, turning mortgage payments into a substantial nest egg. So, when an older couple decides to sell off their fully paid off flat, they aren't just selling their property. They are uncorking a vintage bottle of champagne they've been saving for 40 years. The proceeds from that sale will fund their retirement, and this creates an extremely high psychological floor price. They cannot afford to sell cheaply. It's not just about greed, it's about survival. This dynamic means an entire generation of sellers is immune to lowball offers, creating a powerful force that keeps prices stubbornly high. And yet, this entire concept of the HDB as a perpetually appreciating asset rests on one giant, inconvenient truth that creates a fundamental contradiction at the heart of the market. I'm talking about the 99-year lease. Unlike freehold property, an HDB flat is a leasehold property. When the 99 years are up, the flat is returned to the state and its value becomes theoretically zero. For years, this was an abstract concept, but now the clock is ticking louder. We have a growing number of flats with less than 60 years left on their lease. This creates a massive paradox. Why are people paying record high prices for what is technically a depreciating asset? It's the economic equivalent of paying COE prices for a car that has to be scrapped next year. Part of the answer lies in a collective bet against reality. Many buyers are focused on the short to medium term. They plan to buy, live in the flat for the 5-year minimum occupation period, and then sell it for the profit to the next buyer. It's a game of musical chairs, and the music is a very slow, 99-year-long ambient track. There's also a deep-seated unspoken belief that the government will never actually let a town of full elderly residents see their life savings evaporate. People whisper about SERS, the Selective En Bloc Redevelopment Scheme, where the government buys back old flats at market rates. It's the ultimate HDB lottery ticket, but the government has repeatedly stressed that SERS will be extremely rare. Yet, the hope persists, and that hope, however irrational, gets priced into every transaction, propping up the values of even the oldest flats. To get a better sense of this complex ecosystem, I needed to speak with someone on the front lines.
So the thing that's driving up HDB resale prices is actually just the older generation being cash rich from like asset progression. Basically, what that means is they are selling their landed or their condos for 4 million and above, and that cash in turn helps them to pay off this HDB and still retire with a very comfortable sum. So that's why they are very okay with paying a little bit above valuation and market prices, because at the end of the day, they still can retire comfortably.
Person A is a Senior Associate Marketing Director at PropNext Realty, a title so long that it barely fits on a name card. He's been navigating the very fierce currents of the property market for over a decade, witnessing the rise of the million-dollar flats firsthand. I asked him what he thinks is the single biggest psychological driver of these sales that most of us miss.
I think most common for Singaporeans, they like to talk about BTO being the start of that investment journey. Property can indeed be an investment vehicle. Let's talk about BTO, right? We got places like Bidadari going for almost $500,000 in profit. That's almost like hitting the lottery. You're getting $500,000 in cash.
The lottery effect, the idea that your home isn't just a home, but your primary path to wealth, your first pot of gold. That's an incredibly powerful and seductive narrative. But what does it actually feel to be a player in that game? To spend that kind of money in a public flat? To look at your bank account and decide to write a check with that many zeros on it? I found a couple who did just that, taking the plunge into the million-dollar pool. James and Sarah recently purchased a flat near Ghim Moh Market for $1.2 million. They both work in the tech industry, earn a very good income, but they were both tired of waiting for a BTO that might never come. I wanted to know if they felt insane spending that much money on their first home, or if, in the strange logic of today's market, it felt like the only choice they had.
I think it was very difficult for us because we had no choice. We had to BTO for over 2 to 3 years unsuccessfully. And then we got queue numbers that went up to the thousands for the popular locations. And we did some simple math. We realized that we have to wait another 3 to 4 years just to maybe get a flat, and then wait another 5 years for it to be built. By the time we are like 30, 40 years old already, and the opportunity cost was getting heavier and heavier, we wanted to settle down. We essentially wanted to buy years of our life back and start a family already. So we cannot follow the government's timeline, and I think resale was the less worst option.
Forced savings, buying convenience, buying years of your life back. Those are not the phrases you typically associate with public housing. But this is the new vocabulary of the Singaporean housing dream. And to be fair, the government isn't just sitting back and watching the market boil over.
Yeah. So in the 1990s, actually, the government's agenda was to push property for investment. But after a while, when the government realized that property is more of a need because of the incoming population growth and everything, cooling measures were more to stop people from owning too many properties. And they want to make property affordable, make it a need, and not just some investment tool also lah.
There's the 15-month wait out period for people who sell their private property before they can buy a resale flat, aimed directly at those cash rich downgraders.
It's mainly because of these private property downgraders. This actually kind of spoil the market. So of course, government always does a lot of cooling measures, not just to piss people off, of course, is to control the market and control the prices. So this 15, 30 months is for them to have a cool down period so that they don't overinflate the market prices.
They have significantly ramped up the supply of BTOs to clear the pandemic era backlog. And most significantly, they have introduced new classifications of future flats, prime and plus flats, which are built in the best locations but come with a longer 10-year minimum occupation period and subsidy clawbacks upon resale. This is a direct attempt to curb that lottery effect.
Resale flats are very expensive, and we took a mortgage on that. That's why our monthly mortgage payments are quite significant. It's the biggest portion in our budget actually, and we had no choice. We had to cut our discretionary spending, go out less, eat less fancy dinners. Yeah, and it's kind of forcing ourselves to save more.
But these are long term solutions designed to reshape the market a decade from now. For the generation trying to buy a home right now, they are stuck navigating a market that feels fundamentally, structurally broken.
I think it's very important to be brutally honest with yourself as well as your partner on what you can afford and what you're willing to sacrifice. Ensure that you can pay back your mortgage payments and you have enough to eat as well. Don't just because you want to buy a very prime location that you really, really like, then you eat grass every day. So don't just because of a dream location, then you completely lose your common sense.
We have engineered a system where the lines between a social good and a financial asset have been hopelessly, perhaps irreversibly, blurred. It's a system that has successfully housed the nation, an incredible achievement. But it has also become one of the biggest drivers of social and wealth inequality. The HDB flat is no longer just a home, it's an investment portfolio, a retirement plan, a status symbol, a source of wealth, and for an increasing number of younger Singaporeans, a source of immense financial pressure. So, where does that leave us? The uncomfortable truth is that the high prices are a feature, not a bug, of Singapore's success. They reflect a safe, prosperous, and intensely desirable city where people want to live, work, and plant their roots. But they also present us with a profound, almost existential challenge. How do we keep the foundational promise of affordable housing alive for the next generation without completely unwinding the nest egg that millions of other Singaporeans have painstakingly stored in the walls of their homes? There are no easy answers here. It's a delicate high stakes balancing act, a policy tightrope walk over a pit of demographic anxieties and economic aspirations. But as long as the million-dollar mark keeps getting breached, is a question that we simply cannot afford to ignore. This is Soysha for the Singapore Grind.